ladies and gentlemen of the Twin Tiers. I'm your PhD of Politics, Dr. Stephen Coleman, and welcome to the 37th Political Pundit Night, live on mytwintiers.com. Tonight's topic, the 2024 presidential election, final arguments as former President Donald Trump squares off against Vice President Kamala Harris in less than 2 weeks on Election Day, November the 5th. At this point, I'd like to introduce tonight's pundits, and I'm really grateful for all the pundits that participate in this program, all these community leaders, and also grateful for the hundreds of viewers that watch this podcast on a loyal and regular basis. Tonight's pundits, Dr. Joseph Kolasinski, Associate Professor, Elmira College, and political analyst. Jeff Murray, veteran journalist, Star Gazette, USA Today Network. Georgia Verdier, veteran political analyst. The Reverend Nathaniel Wright, pastor of the Calvary Baptist Church in Ithaca. Tom Santulli, former Chemung County executive. Brent Sturmer, Chemung County legislator. Deborah Lynch, member of the New York State Democratic Committee and Hammondsport Village trustee. Tom Riley, a famous attorney in the Twin Tiers. Everybody knows Tom Riley. Really? Yes, it's Tom Riley. He's here this evening. Pleasure to have him. Susan Betchtetoma, attorney, pastor of the Shiloh Community Church in Corning. Dr. Richard Dozier, author, pastor, educator. Chris Callis is here, community educator. He puts on those college nights for the community at the Elks Club every year. And when we get to Chris Callis, I hope he can tell us what's going on with the one that's coming up in 2025. But we'll talk to Chris a little bit later. So Jeff Murray, veteran journalist, Star Gazette, USA Today Network. He'll be, again, talking to us very shortly. But right now, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the 2024 presidential election. Running with former President Trump on the Republican ticket is Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Running with Vice President Harris on the Democratic ticket is Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Of course, there are other candidates besides Republican Trump and Democrat Harris. Cornel West is running for president as an independent candidate. Additionally, Jill Stein is the Green Party candidate for president, and Chase Oliver is the Libertarian Party candidate for the nation's highest office. These independent and third-party candidates have no chance of winning in November, ladies and gentlemen, but may draw votes away from Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, and in doing so, tip the balance in a close election. The 7 so-called swing states for the presidential election are Pennsylvania, 19 electoral votes, and we have Michigan with 15, Wisconsin with 10 electoral votes, North Carolina with 16, Georgia with 16, Arizona with 11, Nevada with 6. Altogether, the 7 swing states represent 93 electoral votes, and those very much are up for grabs right now. In most, if not all, of the swing states, it's really too close to call between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. The goal for the Trump and Harris campaigns is to accumulate the 270 votes in the Electoral College to win the presidency. By the way, in case you're wondering, New York State has 28 electoral votes, which Harris will win, given the fact that New York is a Democratic Party stronghold. Now, I want to talk about the Electoral College for a moment. In the Electoral College, each state has the number of electoral votes equivalent to the size of its congressional delegation. The candidate who wins the popular vote in a state gets all of that state's electoral votes, but there are 2 exceptions, Maine and Nebraska. Maine has 4 electoral votes, two statewide, and one for each of the two congressional districts. Nebraska has 5 electoral votes, two statewide, and one for each of the three congressional districts. Again, 270 electoral votes are needed to win the presidency. Right now, on the 37th Political Pundit Night, exclusively on mytwintears.com, I'd like to turn to Elmira College's Associate Professor, Joseph Kolosinski, our political analyst, among others, for this evening. Dr. Kolosinski, what's your analysis on the current state of the race? Who is likely to win and why? And plus, after getting to that, what are your thoughts? Dr. Kolosinski.
Well, thank you, Steve. It's lovely to be here once again, where someone has to call at the most inopportune time. Lovely to be here again. And as I think everyone is aware, this election seems to be teetering on a razor's edge. If we were to look at, oh, wait, look at where we are. Oh, okay. Hopefully you're seeing that.
Yes, we can see the map of the United States.
Okay, good. All right. So, you know, this is very tight. This is where the election is with the states that lean. Like, so every state, this is the current lead in every state. Kamala Harris is at 276 electoral votes, including all of that. Uh, Donald Trump is leading in states that have a total of 262 electoral votes. As you mentioned, Steve, there are those 7 swing states. Again, I pick up my data. I get my data from a site called electoralvote.com. They do a daily summary of where we are with the Electoral College. And if you follow that on a day-to-day basis, you see these 7 states just dancing back and forth because really they're all within the margin of error. And if you have something that is just consistently within the margin of error, repeated polling isn't really telling us much other than that they are close. But these are the current leads, and so I did the thing that I've been doing, and I put up the states. So the map is a little bit different here. That has everything with less than a 4-point lead as a toss-up. But I put put all the states into my model, ran 40,000 simulated elections, and it surprised me that it came out with a much higher, and this isn't actually these results, much higher probability for Kamala Harris than I expected. I redid the analysis looking only at the swing states, so setting all of the safe, all of what you would call the reds, I would think maybe are the safe red states, all the safe blue states. That's 226 for Kamala Harris and 219 for Donald Trump. Ran it again, and I still got a number that I think is much larger than I expected, with about little under 70% win for Kamala Harris. Ultimately, as I pondered this, it's not as unreasonable as I thought, because if you look at where Harris is um, starting from a larger base of absolutely safe states, and she's closer to 270, so she has fewer states to make up. There are a lot more collections, there are a lot more possible paths to a Harris victory than there is to a Trump victory, looking at these numbers, and I'm going to get back to that. So I think, particularly based on this data, uh, you want to be Kamala Harris rather than Donald Trump. Now, how much should we trust this? I know it's been There's a lot of folks here talking about not trusting polls, and that makes a certain amount of sense, right? The polls in 2016, particularly, but also in 2020, underestimated Donald Trump's turnout. Um, and what pollsters will do, and is they will get the hard data, they will make the phone calls, they will get the hard data, but then what they do to get their likely voter models is they try to fit their data to what they expect the electorate's going to look like that turns out. So, if there are 20% in the sample of a certain demographic, and they expect 30% of 30% of the electorate to be from that sample, they will make that portion of the electorate a little bit bigger. And there's a lot of guesswork. That is like the secret sauce for every pollster in how they get their likely voter models, and there is a certain amount of guesswork in those. So really, that analysis looks good for Kamala Harris, but this thing could go either way. You know, um, polls underestimated Trump for 2 elections, could happen again, but it's just as likely, possibly more likely, that of course the pollsters are aware of this, and this time they've overcorrected. Um, there are a lot of um, there's a massive number. There was a massive number, particularly after Harris entered the race as the presidential candidate. Massive number of uh, new registrations. Are those baked into the models or aren't they? Right, that could make a huge difference. Late deciders seem to be tilting about 60-40 in Harris's direction. That could make a huge difference. Uh, Really, the message here, we really don't know where this thing is going to go. Um, so vote anyway. You know, you know, you don't think Trump's going to be able to pull it out, but you want Trump to win. Vote anyway. You think Harris doesn't have a chance anymore, but but you want her to win. You'd rather have her as president. Vote anyway, um, because ultimately it's that close. Um, so taking taking off my relatively unbiased or attempted unbiased analyst hat, and maybe putting on my pundit hat for a moment. Um, I think everybody here knows where I stand on the election. I don't know that I need to make that case any further, although um, we're still seeing disturbing things from Donald Trump, like the stuff about the current rhetoric about the enemy within, and talks about you know turning the military or turning the National Guard at this enemy within. And I think, or at least I've read a couple of articles opining that maybe a lot of folks who um, a lot of folks who support Donald Trump aren't taking this kind of talk seriously. You know, um, we hear stories about him saying to generals, why aren't we shooting the protesters? We could shoot them in the legs. I think that's from that Atlantic article from the last week or so. Um, I think a lot of people are rationalizing he's not going to do that, right? That's just hyperbole. That's just him having a little fun. Um, my only question there is, why would you trust it? Why would you take that chance? Right? I mean, that seems to be a very dangerous thing to do as a country. Um, I think best case scenario, if Donald Trump gets wins reelected, our best case scenario is that we're looking at the second coming of Joseph McCarthy, except if Joseph McCarthy got to be president. Um, on the other side, Kamala Harris had great momentum for the first couple of months of her run. It really stalled and maybe even started sliding back a little bit in the other direction when she shifted from a positive message to a Donald Trump is dangerous kind of message. And I think she's realizing that and is starting to shift back. And I'm hoping that 2 weeks is enough for that to make a difference. But I think that's what we need right now. And uh, back to you, Steve. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Joseph Kolosinski, Associate Professor at Elmira College. There are definitely different views in the country. Some people see, well, they see Donald Trump, and I think it's true. He's a serial liar, a convicted felon, a liar, serial liar, a convicted felon. That's Donald Trump. He lacks presidential character, a lot of people opine. On the other side, lots of Americans, millions of Americans, think Kamala Harris is a slimy chameleon as a politician, and frankly, is to the left of Bernie Sanders. All kinds of left wing radical views if you go back and look at her record, but she's moderated for this election. And that's what politicians do. Talking about this election, what politicians do, and all the rest, we're very lucky to have with us this evening Jeff Murray, veteran journalist, Star Gazette, USA Today Network. And Jeff, I want you to sort of, give the journalistic perspective, the journalistic overview of what's going on with the presidential election, but also if you want to chime in other areas such as the Senate, the House, and more local elections, such as the local congressional election in the 23rd Congressional District, go right ahead. Jeff Murray, USA Today Network, you have the microphone.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. Again, thanks for having us and have the opportunity to discuss these very important issues tonight. I have been covering elections since my very first election was in 1980, and of course that was when Ronald Reagan unseated incumbent Jimmy Carter, and I've covered almost every election since then, both local elections and state elections, and some to do with the national election. And there's always been, particularly in the presidential races, I've always noticed there's been a lot of rhetoric. There's been a lot of hyperbole. Reagan was going to get us into World War III. Every election is the most important election of our lifetime, and I'm hearing that with this one too. I think one thing that really strikes me about this election is this time both sides are screaming, if the other side wins, it's the end. It's the end of democracy. It's the end of our country as we know it. It's not just one side saying it, they're both saying it. So they're saying it about the other side. So that in itself is probably more extreme than I've ever seen. Another thing that I have that I've observed as both professionally and just personally with some interest in politics, is that I've noticed there are kind of like three types of voters out there. One, you've got the voter, they're going to vote for their party no matter what. If this candidate's got a D next to the name, they're going to vote for it. Or if it's got an R next to his name, no matter what this person's background is or what they stand for, they're loyal party followers and they're going to vote that way. Then you've got the more discerning voters, a lot of the undecideds, the ones who actually take time to look at the issues and study the issues and look at where each candidate stands on those issues, and those candidates, their background, their experience, their qualifications. And then you've got the what I would consider the casual voters, the ones who rely more on personality. Who do they like more? Who's got the charisma? Bill Clinton had charisma, whether you agreed with his policies or not. He just came across as likable. Barack Obama came across as likable. In that way, I kind of think that Trump has a little bit of an advantage simply because just putting aside where either candidate stands on the issues, Trump is just more of a natural showman. he just seems to know how to engage with his audience. I've just gotten the impression that Harris, particularly in the start of her campaign, kind of followed Joe Biden's model, where in 2020 Biden pretty much campaigned from his basement, got out for a few events, and in his case that seemed to work because he won. Um, it seemed to kind of go that way initially, and then I've just noticed in the last several weeks that Harris is getting more, doing more media things, doing more sit down interviews, things like that, and I kind of figure that maybe it's because her people were telling her that the other way is not working. You got to get out there more. Whereas Trump has been doing that all along. So if you the people who just vote, particularly on basically on who they like, um, who they just like as a candidate simply because they like what they project, then I think that would give a small edge to Trump. Now, obviously, Trump is also known for saying stupid things, and sometimes he'll say things that I'll say, "What did he just say?" And he can certainly come across as uh, as a braggart and a blowhard, and all those things are true. But he's also, he knows how to play the crowd. He gets a big crowd. He gets them whipped up, and if you just look at his events versus Harris's events, it just seems like there's more enthusiasm there. Will that translate into more votes on November 5th? That, as Professor Kolosinski mentioned, that's anybody's guess at this point, and it's very close to call. But right now, I found it very interesting that Harris seems to be changing her game plan a little bit, trying to get out there more, and make herself better known. Whether that's going to work or not, again, it's pretty late in the game, so we'll see how that plays out. Um, I did want to touch briefly on other races, particularly the congressional races. Here in the southern tier, we've got the race for the U.S. House of Representatives. You got Republican Nick Langworthy, the incumbent. He's facing a challenge from Democrat Thomas Carl. Uh, Obviously, all eyes are in a presidential race, but you've got Republicans have a very narrow majority in the House. The Senate is basically tied. And so both of those houses could look very different after this election. So those are very important races to watch as well. And Carl and Langworthy, but both been out there on the campaign trail. I have not been following that race as closely as I have the presidential race, obviously. But that's that race, and the other congressional races over in the next district over, Representative Molinaro, Republican incumbent, facing a pretty stiff challenge from Democrat as well. Those are races that are going to be very important as Republicans try to hold on to the majority in the House and Democrats try to regain that majority. Really, at least here in Chemung County, there aren't any other. There's a few contested races. There's a race in town of Horseheads. There's a family court race, three-way family court race for 2 seats in Chemung County, and that's about it. All the other races are pretty much uncontested. It's a congressional race, and of course you got the U.S. Senate race with incumbent Gillibrand. She's got a Republican challenger as well. So those could have an impact on what Congress looks like coming up in 2025, and certainly those are important as well. Maybe equally as important as the presidential race.
Thank you, Jeff. Lots of things may happen that could be historical. Not only the race between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, Democrats need a gain of 4 seats to take control of the House. The House could very well flip to the Democrats. Meantime, Republicans need a gain of 1 or 2 seats. Republicans need a gain of 1 or 2 seats to flip the Senate. So we may have a situation where the House is flipped to the Democrats and the Senate is flipped to the Republicans. This kind of a double flip, this would be the first time in American history if this happens. So stay tuned for that. I wanted to mention also, pollsters tend to underestimate Donald Trump for whatever reason. In 2016, they made that mistake. In 2020, they could very well make the same mistake in 2024. I remember back in the summer of 2016, I was a regular commentator and talk show host on WETM News and had my own program. In the summer of 2016, I predicted Donald Trump would win. Nobody believed it. In fact, I got an email from a colleague, and he said, "Steve, I'm vacationing on the Cape, and someone called me and said that you have said Donald Trump's going to win the 2016 presidential election." And my colleague jokingly said, "Steve, what have you been smoking?" Well, Donald Trump went on to win, not the popular vote, but the Electoral College in 2016. He lost, no matter what he says, he lost in 2020, and now we have 2024. So we'll see what happens. A lot to talk about tonight on Political Pundit Night. Jeff Murray, that was a really good analysis. Before we move on to the next pundit this evening, anything else you'd like to say?
I just did want to add, kind of build on what you just said and what Professor Kolasinski said earlier about the polls. I've never been a real big believer in polls either. I mean, like you said, in 2016, most of the polls pointed to a big win by Hillary. Obviously, that didn't happen. 2018, everybody thought that the Republicans were going to ride a red wave and possibly take the Senate and take over the House big time. That didn't happen. They did gain enough seats to take over the House, but not by anywhere near as much as they thought. So I've always kind of taken polls with somewhat of a grain of salt myself. If all the polls are kind of pointing one way, that might be different. I am seeing different polls saying different things. The poll that I believe the most is the one that'll happen on November 5th.
Actually,
That's right.
Jeff, if I can comment on that just a second. I mean, that was because of the way they built their turnout models. The pollsters built their turnout models, not necessarily because of the data that they were getting.
That's true. Let's see, Joseph, if the pollsters screw up again this time. Hopefully they will not. Wanted to mention, and we're going to move on to Georgia Verdier momentarily for her analysis of the election. Want to talk about the 23rd congressional district race. Thomas Carl, the Democrat, is running against Nick Langworthy, the incumbent Republican. I saw the debate between the two of them on WETM television recently, and Nick Langworthy did a good job of regurgitating Donald Trump's talking points. And Thomas Carl did a good job of regurgitating the talking points of Kamala Harris. He's not as smooth as Nick Langworthy. He's not a professional politician. He's a businessman. And so he struggles. He struggled more in the debate to be as smooth as Nick Langworthy. I think Nick Langworthy won the debate because of experience and knowledge, although Thomas Carl did the best he could. So congratulations to Thomas Carl. Another very important race, and this is again a spin-off of what we heard just moments ago from Jeff Murray. The family court means a lot. Family court means one heck of a lot to human beings and families in this area. And we have Mary Tarantelli. Mary is a Republican. She's already has a seat in family court. She's running again. And so she, very important race. Now, there's another seat open, and there's a competition for this other seat, which was added by the state of New York. And the two candidates for that other seat, the new seat for family court, Matthew Bezzetti, a Democrat. You probably know Matthew Bezzetti because his commercials are on an awful lot on television, and he's a very telegenic figure. So he's running for family court. And then Brian Maggs, is running the other candidate. Brian Maggs, a Republican, and he's running. In fact, I watched WETM 18 News last night, 11 o'clock, and there was some kind of an event at Elmira. I think it was at Elmira High School, and it was Matthew Bizzetti talking about family court, and Mary Tarantelli talking about a family court. And that was great. I think it was great that those two went to the high school last night and talked about family court. I didn't see Brian Maggs. We'll have to see how this turns out. Again, Mary Tarantelli already has a seat for family court, but there's another one. And that really, I think, is going to be a face-off between Brian Maggs, the Republican, and Matthew Bizzetti, the Democrat. So those are
Steve,
the.
can I just interject real quick here? I believe that's a three-way race. My understanding is that
with two
you vote,
seats.
you vote the two best vote getters. So Mary
Yes.
Tarantelli isn't running by herself; she's running against.
That's right.
So if
That's right.
whichever two candidates get the most votes, they're in. The other one is out in the cold.
Right.
So
Mary Tarantelli, again, there's two seats in family court. 3 people are running. One is incumbent, Mary Tarantelli, who has the advantage of incumbency. She's also a Republican in a Republican area. And the other two, Matthew Bizzetti, the Democrat, and Brian Maggs, the Republican, and they were at Elmira High School last night. And when I saw the news report on WETM 18 News last night, I didn't see Brian Maggs. So apparently Brian Maggs did not go, for whatever reason, to the event last night at Elmira High School. But family court is very important. Also, just wanted to mention, Tom O'Mara, state senator, has no competition. I think that's sad for democracy. Christopher Friend, the state assembly, the 124th Assembly District, Christopher Friend has no opposition, which I think is bad for democracy. The county clerk running is Linda Four. She's a Republican. No opposition. I think that's bad for democracy. So that's the deal. And then Kirsten Gillibrand, the U.S. Senator, has a Republican opponent. Gillibrand obviously is a Democrat. She has a Republican opponent. Michael, whatever his name is, I really haven't heard of him. I don't think her opponent has run much of a campaign, but that's the deal with that. So those are some of the things. Also, there's something called Proposal 1. Proposal 1 that's going to be on the ballot. And at some point, I'll mention Proposal 1 later in this cybercast. But right now, I'd like to get to the real important thing in terms of Political Pundit Night. Real important thing is Joseph Kolosinski. The real important thing besides Joseph is Jeff Murray, and then the other pundits that are here that are contributing their time for political discourse in this community. Georgia Verdier, political analyst this evening. Georgia, the race between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, what say you? What do you think?
Thank you, Dr. Coleman, for having this meeting, and good evening, everybody. I would like to talk a little bit about the poll analyzation. Joseph and Jeff took us on a poll analyzation journey, and if you don't mind, I kind of like to put on my spiritual hat. Is that okay? I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Yeah, that's right. And also that's fine. Put on your spiritual hat. That's absolutely great. And you know that Donald Trump sells Bibles, makes a lot of money selling Bibles.
Well,
anyway,
I'm not going to deal with his China Bibles, but I want to put on my spiritual hat. And I just want to say, I want to talk about the face of America. We were talking about polls and how we can't, we plan to work, but God works the plan. Man is a poll person, and we can analyze them, but God is in charge of the polls. We look back at when Trump won before. We know that Trump was especially permitted to win because when everybody went to bed, I don't think Trump even thought he was going to win. When they told him he had won, he looked surprised. So we know we don't know what the polls hold in terms of what God would have us have. I believe Trump was called for that time to expose America, to show the true face of America, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because he has rolled back the covers on America that we didn't think was under the covers. And he has exposed America to the world. And he has done a good job at it. Now, Mrs. Clinton wouldn't have been able to do that. She doesn't have the character for that. God selected the proper person to do that expose because he fits into that category. So now he not only did he win, and nobody expected it, he has been allowed again because he hadn't finished the job. He's still exposing America because we're seeing Americans validate lies, support criminal behavior, not only support it, but rationalize it and make it and try to normalize it. And so the whole world is getting a good picture of what America looks like. And Trump is doing the job, and he's doing a good job at exposing us. I believe he's almost done with his expose. I believe that a change is coming. It might not come in this election, but I believe a change is coming because God is a just God. He said a liar won't tarry in his sight. And I know he's not pleased with the behavior he's seeing and the American people who are supporting that negative behavior. So we go to church and tell people not to lie, not to steal, not to cheat. Then we go and support his behavior. So what are those people we're teaching thinking about us? You lead by example. So anyway, Trump is doing a good job of that, and he didn't finish under his 4 years, so God is letting him run again to complete the journey. And this might be the end of the journey, but it might not. But I believe the end is coming because I believe healing is in the future for us. Because he said, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves, pray, seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, forgive their sin, and heal the land. So I believe all that we're seeing is part of God's plan. Well, we know it is because nothing happens without his permissive will. So I just say to everybody, hang on in there because we don't have any control of all of this. In the final analysis, whoever God has selected to win this election, that's going to be the winner. But there was some work to be done, and I believe that work is getting done, and we're getting a clear picture of what America really looks like. So maybe we can start healing because America is falling apart, and we're supposed to be an example for the world. And the picture that has been painted is not that pretty. So I'm excited because I believe change is coming.
Georgia Verdier, thank you. A lot of people, I think, in America agree with you, but not all. Some in America feel that the Biden administration and Kamala Harris, part of the Biden administration as vice president, the Biden administration and Kamala Harris failed, and they point to the border. Month after month after month, we heard them say, the border is secure. The border is secure. The border is secure when hordes of people were moving across the border. And they kept saying that. Some would argue that was a big lie. That was a big lie, trying to deceive the American people and treating the American people as if they were stupid. But the American people have eyes. And as the Democrats were saying, the border is secure, hallelujah, it's secure. People have eyes, and they saw that for what it was, a bunch of a term that Joe Biden calls malarkey, a bunch of malarkey. So some would say that if you look at the Biden administration and the situation with the border, the situation with the economy, that the Biden administration and Kamala Harris have failed and have failed miserably, and that's why they support Donald Trump. Of course, others think Donald Trump is he's a felon. They think he's a thug. They think he's a serial liar. And you know something? That's the truth. So we have a very interesting situation with these two human beings. I think some people would say both of them don't deserve, both of them do not deserve to be president of the United States. And it's a joke that America has a final election with these two people, a Kamala Harris that in terms of the Senate has been to the left of Bernie Sanders. So there's a lot of controversy, a lot of talk on this election.
Can I speak to that border issue part that you just mentioned?
Excuse me?
May I speak to the border issue part that you just mentioned?
Yes, go right ahead.
See, if whoever is lying, liars won't tarry in God's sight. I'm not. I'm saying the whole picture of America has been painted. However you see it, if they were lying about it, they were lying about it. But one of the things we have to talk about the border. If the border wanted, if America wanted the border to be fixed, it would have been fixed. They've been fighting over that border. It's been a political football. They've been fighting over that border forever. And it is a good running issue for right now because it could have been helped by that bill that got kicked into the trash can. Maybe it was late, but there was a start to do something better, and it just got cast aside because it wanted to be a running issue. So what I'm saying, they're playing ball with things, whoever it is, and that is not right for the American people. We're supposed to be the people that our leaders are concerned about, and they should be working for us, regardless of what side they're on. But in terms of the border issue, we know that a lot of people who have been in position have been not serious enough about that. In this presidential race, the border issue has become so impregnated with lies that is giving birth to nonsense. And so it is losing its impact to people because when you think about it, you think about people are using this to hurt people and lying about it and all that. So everybody who is not playing fair, or they are guilty of not doing what we need to do. We supposed to be too smart to be crazy. And so, but what I'm seeing, I don't see any real seriousness, enough seriousness from all the people who have power over that border to come. If we can put a man on the moon, we can solve that border problem. So it's just about, do you want to solve it, or is that a political football that will enable you to do whatever or get whatever you want?
Well, there are folks that say that that bill, that bipartisan bill, that Donald Trump torpedoed, I think it was in the third year, too little, too late, kind of. But Donald Trump torpedoed it, and therefore he has some fault there. But some will say, as borders are, Kamala Harris was a complete and utter failure. And she's become more strict on the border because she realizes what people are thinking that vote and so on. So that's a big deal. That's a big deal to Americans.
She was not president. She was vice president.
Well,
the president is the one who really is in the driver's seat.
Yeah, you're right. And she's been asked, what would she do differently than what Joe Biden has done? And she essentially says, well, I can't think of anything, but I'm the vice president, and vice presidents respect the presidents and so on. But I'm not going to take sides. I think that, frankly, Donald Trump is a deeply flawed human being. He's a felon. He's a liar. But I also think Kamala Harris is a deeply flawed human being. And frankly, this is my opinion. I don't think any of them, two of them, have any business being president of the United States. I think they're both a disgrace. And but to go on, I want to go on to Reverend Nathaniel Wright, pastor of the Calvary Baptist Church in Ithaca. Reverend Wright, good evening. And Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, the election coming up, days away. I think it's 11 days away, November the 5th. What are your thoughts? Who do you think's gonna win, Reverend Wright?
Well, first, thank you, Dr. Coleman, for having me on. It's certainly always great to be on these pundit nights and have great conversation. I think the race, if go by polls, the race is way too close. I don't think there's as much fluctuation. If you look at like the poll of polls, then there's not as much fluctuation in it. Recently, the Emerson poll says that late deciding voters are breaking 60 to 36 towards Harris, which would give her enough in each of the swing states necessary for her to win the Electoral College. I think one of the interesting things about this particular campaign is kind of the in my estimation, kind of the failure of media to properly cover the things that are going on, right? So there are narratives that I think just aren't true, right? And so former President Trump over the past 2 weeks has canceled everything from 60 Minutes to CNBC interviews to local NBC affiliates, has really ramped down his campaigning and public appearances. And while I'm not quite sure all that Vice President Harris will do, she talks about ideas that folks may agree with or may not agree with. what we do have is 4 years of Donald Trump as president, and so we can't. It's not like it's not an apples to apples comparison because we don't know what she will do as president. Yet we do know what he has done as president. Everything from election denial to during pandemic, encouraging, whether tongue or cheek or not, encouraging folks to inject bleach, sending COVID testings, as we discovered, testing machines to Putin, denying how serious the pandemic was in the beginning, refusing to disavow the Proud Boys. And he was president and did nothing about the border, and then later would kill a bipartisan border deal. During this particular campaign, what is increasingly worrisome and troublesome to me are just his rhetoric that someone mentioned earlier about the enemy within, his continued insistence on the Haitian immigrants who are here legally, eating pets or whatever nonsense he was talking, as he continues to push Project 2025. You can't disassociate yourself from something that so many people connected to your campaign continue to do, that includes so many horrific things, not limited to either the dismantling of the Department of Education or, at one of his campaign stops last week, defunding schools that teach anything about a real historic, proper view of slavery. It is imperative, in my estimation, that I would while I certainly do respect all views, and Dr. Coleman, I certainly do appreciate your opinion. I don't think that the types of individuals, all there are in the world are flawed people. But I don't think the kind of flaws that Vice President Harris brings to the table comes anywhere near the flaws that Donald Trump brings to the table. It is something that, as a person of color, frightens me for not just my own well-being, but for the well-being of my child and any other person of color. I do not believe that he has the best interest of any minority group, and I certainly do believe that his policies would be very detrimental and more divisive for us as a nation. So prayerfully, if I can use such language, prayerfully, if polls are to be believed, things will continue to trend, and Vice President Harris would win. I think the space in which, as he wants generals as loyal to him as they were to Hitler, as he continues to ratchet up rhetoric that is far too reminiscent of terrible times in the past. I think we have to be able to take what he says seriously. And if I'm unable to take what he says seriously, then how is it that we are to know anything that he's going to do?
Reverend Wright, last night at a CNN town hall, Kamala Harris said that Donald Trump is a fascist. You're an African-American leader, a man of the cloth. So Donald Trump is a fascist, but to just go on with that, do you think, Reverend Nathaniel Wright, that Donald Trump is a racist?
I do. I think he has a history. If he is not a racist, certainly we don't know what is in anyone's heart. But all I can do is go based upon his activity, right? And so everything from being fined by housing department for him and his father, denying applications to those who African Americans who were trying to rent from his apartment building, to his full-page ad and still refusal to apologize to the Central Park Five, his continued divisive speech. If General Kelly's interview is to be believed, not only did General Kelly call him a fascist, but also as he made derogatory comments about a U.S. military member who was killed in Texas, and not wanting to, after pledging to pay the bill, not wanting to pay the $60,000 bill, saying that it doesn't cost that much to bury a Mexican. It is absolutely, from us being introduced to him, coming down that staircase in 2015, that escalator rather, it has been fairly clear that he has sewn into and found a way to exploit the worst divisive parts of this yet to be United States of America.
Reverend Wright, Donald Trump, a fascist, Donald Trump, a racist. Given that, there is some concern. Barack Obama has expressed some concern that the majority of Black men support Kamala Harris, but less than the last two presidential elections. Why is that? Why is it in 2016, 2020 seems to be more support among the African American community, but not as much this time? What is the reason for that, do you think, Nathaniel Wright? Or is that just wrong?
Yeah, I think that since the African American community is not a monolith, I think that there's probably a number of factors. I would not discount, just as in 2016, I would not discount anything in terms of sexism. We have to remember that the Democratic Party is certainly running a African American female for president. And one of the things that I think polls got wrong in 2016 is underestimating what kind of support or non-support we were ready for when it came to a female president. The other thing that I would like to point out is that no matter how we slice it, even though what will decide the election as it did in 2016 and in 2020, the African American vote, because African Americans make up a smaller percentage of the electorate, the way that white women vote will play a larger role in who becomes president. And so in 2016, that break for Trump was unexpected and unseen. We'll see whether or not his convictions or being found liable of sexual assault and his stance on Roe v. Wade and the overturning of that, as he claims takes credit for those things. We'll see whether or not how that impacts the female vote.
The Reverend Nathaniel Wright, pastor of the Calvary Baptist Church in Ithaca. He used to be the pastor of the Friendship Baptist Church in Corning. So everybody knows Reverend Wright in the Twin Tiers. And I appreciate the fact that he appears on these programs, Political Pundit Night. This is the 37th Political Pundit Night, exclusively on mytwintiers.com. I want to thank Nexstar Television, WETM, for supporting this program by letting it air. They could put the kibbutz on this very quickly. They could just, pull the plug, and they haven't done that. Again, this is the 37th one, so I really appreciate their support. Now, some folks out there, they always ask me, when Dr. Coleman is the next Political Pundit Night? Well, the next one, the 38th Political Pundit Night, will be 100 days from the presidential election, and that will bring us to Thursday, February the 13th, 2025. So I want people watching to mark your calendars for February the 13th, 2025 for the 38th Political Pundit Night as we go along here on mytwintiers.com. I want to move on now to Tom Santulli. Tom Santulli, we've heard tonight that Donald Trump is a racist, that Donald Trump is a fascist. And now some would say, well, during his tenure, Americans were a lot better off with the economy. The grocery bill wasn't as high, and so on and so on. But Tom Santulli, you're a long-time political figure in the Twin Tiers. I would call you at this point in your life a statesman. Statesman Tom Santulli. Yeah, like Madison and Jefferson and Lincoln, Rosie. You're a statesman, Tom Santulli. what do you think of this election? Who's going to win and why? Tom Santulli.
Well, thanks, Steve, very much, as always. You know, I don't think we're going to have a good handle on who the next president is until a week from Tuesday. I just feel strongly about that. You know, I read the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal today, and all three of them are saying that this race is too close to call. I watched last night on CNN with Vice President Harris, and I thought it was interesting at the end. I mean, there were no Republicans on that panel, and there certainly were no conservatives on that panel that talked to her. But at the end of the night, as much as they like her, they were quick to say, including Axelrod, who was somewhat critical of her, and I say it because I'm surprised about her. I mean, she is 3.5 years vice president. She was a United States senator. She's well spoken, but for whatever reason, and maybe it's her handlers, she never ever seems to really stay on message with anything when she's asked questions. I mean, that has just been the Democrats themselves have complained about the fact that she's just not being a person that is speaking what's on her mind, that she's either being told not to say certain things or to be too cautious. So I think that we really don't know, in my opinion, much about VP president, even though she's been around for a long time. I think she's been just too overly careful, and when she talks, and it's almost like she's afraid. She was against the wall. Wall was the worst thing to do. Why'd they put this wall up? Putting up the wall is stupid. Now she's for the wall. You know, all the things that seem to be, quite frankly, that Trump had talked about, she seems to be pulling herself to. And it's no secret, I'm not a big Trump fan either. But you know, that being said, I think you have to look at the big picture. First of all, politics in this country has been broken for a number of years. I mean, it just has been. I think the quality of the candidates aren't what they used to be. And I think the nastiness, it's on both sides. You can say what you want about Trump, and he certainly has his weaknesses. I can name a bunch of people on the Democrat side who can be just as nasty. And what's really happened is everything today is about winning. Everything's about winning. It's never about, you know, there are people out there, and I think it's lost in the message. There's a ton of people out there struggling every day. Prices are outrageous. Costs are outrageous. We have allowed 10 million people to come into this country, the only country in the world that allows migration over the border. We don't even know who these people are. There's people being, and I don't know, you know, if people are eating dogs. I hear all that nonsense too. I do know this. There's been some very innocent people who have been killed or hurt because of people that have come across this border that we don't know who they are. We know the Chinese have come across this border. Why are they here? You know, what's going to go happen down the road? To me, it's scary with all these folks. And I'm sure there's a lot of great people that who are just looking for a job, who are coming across the border, who want to be citizens. But, you know, I also feel somewhat sorry for people who went through the process to become a United States citizen, that are now watching 10 million people come across. So I think there's a lot to be learned on both sides. I think that this is going to be an extremely close election, and it's going to be the electoral college that, you know, the majority vote today now means nothing. It's the 7 swing states. How they come out in the end is going to determine the next president. And from what I saw in the last couple of days, Trump has got a good shot at winning the electoral college. She's got a good shot about getting the most votes.
Mm-hmm. Tom Santulli, I think what you're saying makes sense. I think that Kamala Harris, I think, will definitely win the popular vote. The question is who wins the electoral vote? And of course, you need those 270 electoral votes to be elected president of the United States. I want to be fair about something. When Kamala Harris rambles, they say David Axelrod, the Democrat strategist on CNN, said last night that when she doesn't want to answer a question, she gives a word salad and goes all over the place. And David Axelrod, who is a Democrat, as everybody knows, said that last night. But I want to be fair. When Donald Trump is speaking and he goes hippity hop at the barber shop and jumps from one thing to another, Donald Trump says, I'm doing the weave. Donald Trump says he's doing the weave if he's all over the place. So sometimes I think that we know Donald Trump and people are used to him going all over the place and rambling. And they say, well, that's Donald Trump. But Kamala Harris does it. And David Axelrod takes her to task. Should we say shame, shame, shame on Democrat David Axelrod in this? But Tom Santulli, again, I agree with you. It's going to be a close election, and this is really something. Brent Sturmer is a Chemung County legislator, former member of the Elmira City Council. He's known all over the Twin Tiers, and people can come to him with a problem, and Brent Sturmer will listen. When people talk, Brent Sturmer listens, and people like that. Brent Sturmer is a leader, and I'm fortunate to have him along with the other leaders this evening on this panel. Brent Sturmer, Chemung County legislator, the 2024 presidential election, Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris. What say you?
Once again, thank you for inviting me to this great political pundit night. I always enjoy them. I remember when they were in the Heights Theater. It was so much fun when we were all in person, and you could have all that crowd around you. First, I mean, the Electoral College has to go. How many elections are won by the popular vote and lost by this Electoral College? I think that's one of our issues right from the get-go. I think that the difference is, and when I drive around town, last election cycle, I saw Trump signs everywhere. Now I'm seeing lots of people with Republican signs in their yard, and 10 out of, every 15 of them or so have no Trump signs. So lots of people with Republican signs without their Trump signs. I talk with people, as you said, I really do. I try to talk to everyone and try to give time and merit and weight to what people have to say. And I have friends on both sides of the party, and they're all concerned about, his whole fist thing that he does and how scary that is to them. And I think it's almost the older someone is, the more things like that scare them. I think that when you look at our ranking worldwide, and how we rank on our education, I think that speaks immensely. I was just listening to something the other day, and they were saying, students today can't even read a book cover to cover. They are leaving a Cliff's Notes.
Hello.
It's really a big sign of the country and our loss of education. So I think that Kamala is going to win, but I think that it's not going to be a very pretty day when she does, because I think lots of people will use violence to try to take something they did not win.
I agree with you that it's going to be a real challenge if whoever wins, and if Kamala does win, I think there's probably going to be a divided Congress, and that means a lot of the things she wants to do probably will not pass. But everybody's talking about this election. You're a county legislator, Brett and Brett Sturmer, and Brent, I saw a former county legislator today around town, and Ken Miller, a pro-Trump Republican. He said, Dr. Coleman, he said, I want to give you something. And he showed me this, and I said, $100 bill, Ken, what are you talking about? And then I looked more closely, and this is a $100 bill with Donald Trump on it. that Ken Miller distributes, and it says keep draining in 2024, draining the swamp, and so I have this little. So I want to thank Ken Miller for giving this phony $100 bill with Donald Trump on the thing, but anyway, Ken Miller was on the Chemung County legislature for a term. He defeated Sidney Grabard, who at that point had the seat, and now the seat has moved on. But Brent, congratulations for what you're doing in the legislature. By the way, since you're here tonight, could you share some news that's going on with the Chemung County legislature that no one knows? Anything that people don't know?
Oh, that's a good a good question. I mean, our meetings are live streamed, both in the main chambers and in the conference room. We had an issue with that, but we are back to being live, so anyone can really watch. I'm lucky enough to be working on the county's comprehensive plan. I worked on the city of Elmira's plan when I was a council person. So I hope all of you have already taken that survey and given your input on how you'd like Chemung County to be in the future. I'm lucky enough that the executive has appointed me to a commission on homelessness. So the new commissioner of social services has been leading those meetings, and we've just got a wealth of information, and really, it's nice to learn a lot of data and figure out how we're going to get that out to people and how we're going to work on that. But I think that as we see, we've got so many problems in our great country that need to be solved, and they take time and they take learning about all the different details and the facets. So that's something that's very interesting. And recently we just had the downtown waterfront meeting. It was at the Coleman Center where people were able to give input on how they would like that to be shaped going into the future. All really big things in our area, which is really beginning to attract a lot of tourists.
Brent, I wanted to, before we move on, we're going to be moving on very shortly to Deborah Lynch, but Brent, we've heard allegations tonight. Some would say it's the truth, others would say allegations that Donald Trump is a racist. Beyond Donald Trump being a racist, he's so many other things people are saying. Do you think to just go into different areas? Do you think Donald Trump, besides being a racist, is a misogynist?
Oh, for sure. That's an understatement, I think. I remember growing up and a household where my mom really pushed public radio and television. And I remember, the learning and reading as well when you'd read in the Times when I was a kid about Donald Trump and his father. I think that kind of told me everything, that when he came on to the scene, and he was doing all of his WWE, into that wrestling, which has such an interesting part to it, and he was fun leading that. But he's definitely a misogynist. That's, I don't even know where to go with all the things that he is are not admirable.
We've heard tonight fascist, racist, and misogynist. So lots of people are looking at Donald Trump and feel he does not have the character to be the president of the United States. Others are saying, that, well, during his 4 years, it was better than the years of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. But at this point, I want to move on to Deborah Lynch.
Can we add cruel first, really quick, though, to your list? Cruel. He's a cruel human being. He is cruel to people.
Well, actually, one of his sisters who passed away, she even said that he lacked compassion and was cruel. That was his sister who said that. So that's another thing. Cruel, lacks empathy, lacks compassion, a racist, a fascist, a misogynist. To move on, though, at this point, Deborah Lynch. Thanks, Brent, and we'll be again talking to you soon. Deborah Lynch, member of the New York State Democratic Committee Hammondsport Village trustee, Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris. At one point, Deborah, when it was Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, you thought that, Donald Trump would win the presidency. Do you still think he's going to win? Or do you think Kamala Harris will take the prize?
Well, at this point, I think, like Joe pointed out, and I think Jeff pointed out, that it's kind of a neck and neck race right now, but at least I feel it's a race at this point. Before I didn't think it was. And sadly enough, Joe Biden just, he was failing. We all saw it. We all knew it. And I'm glad that he stepped aside and we've got an actual race going on now. I can tell you one thing, as I drive around and I've been putting yard signs out. I've put yard signs out for both her and our congressional candidate. I see a lot more Harris signs than I ever saw Clinton signs, and I see less Trump signs. And this is in what we consider to be a red district. I mean, let's be honest. So that is, I think, for a while there were, when I ran in Horseheads, one of the very nice elderly African-American women that was right on Westinghouse Road, she refused to take signs because she was literally afraid to take signs. And I think that at this point, people are saying, no, enough's enough. I worry about, and I've brought this up every single time we get on these calls. The issues in front of us are climate change, of course, the economy, immigration, healthcare, social issues, foreign policy. But in terms of importance for me personally, it's climate change, and it always will be. I'm just that person. And I do not believe Donald Trump cares, nor does he listen to the science at all. And I am truly afraid he's already rolled back with his Supreme Court the the laws that were put into place by Richard Nixon, protecting our environment. And our planet is literally choking to death. We have to be aggressive on changing not just climate change issues, but the way we recycle, the way we feed people. I mean, there's so much wrong. And Donald Trump is unfortunately, he was born into wealth. He's never struggled personally. He's caused struggling when he didn't pay contractors to do work on his buildings. But I do believe that he doesn't and cannot relate to the average American. In no way possible can he do that. And it's funny that he talks about immigration the way he does when he's literally married to an immigrant. I just don't understand his whole thought process on that. I literally work for a winery here now. It's my fun retirement job in the Finger Lakes, where the man is not, his winery's been here for 11 years, almost 12. He's French, and he is not an American citizen. His 3 children are, that were all born here, but he is not. He travels back and forth on a visa. But he is terrified, absolutely terrified, that his winery is going to get put out of business because he's not going to be allowed to come here and make his wine. I mean, these are really huge issues. And he employs 17 people, 5 full-time and the rest part-time, with benefits. He has wonderful wine. He's a place that people seek out to come to in the Finger Lakes, and he's terrified that if Donald Trump wins, he's not going to be allowed to come here. So these are things that people think about immigration just in terms of the Mexican border. It's not. It's all other countries that seek to come here and have a life here and build off that life and bring their knowledge here. Half of our physicians in this country are not American citizens. If we do not start treating other countries with respect and dignity and caring, they won't come here. For what? To be treated like that? It's embarrassing to me. It's absolutely embarrassing. And I believe that Kamala She's not my first choice. And by the way, she's not left of Bernie Sanders by any stretch of the imagination. There's no way she is. She's more of a centrist. I believe that she's going to level this playing field, and I think that she'll hopefully, knock on wood, pull it off.
Mhm.
I think it's a different dynamic than Hillary Clinton. I think that she has support by a lot of the minority communities where I don't believe Hillary did. I think it's going to be, I think she'll pull it off. And I hope she does, for my daughter's sake.
Yeah.
And my
I think-
granddaughter's sake.
Yeah, Deborah, I enjoyed hearing your comments, and I agree with you in terms of the environment. There are questions about Donald Trump. There's no question it's drill, baby, drill. He
Yeah.
keeps saying that. In terms of relating to the common man, what about McDonald's? What about McDonald's? Wasn't that now, by the way, he
Donald?
loves McDonald's and he eats their food all the time.
Oh.
So the question I have is, doesn't that indicate that the common man can relate to Donald Trump with McDonald's?
Because he goes in the back room, puts on a bib, and wears his tie and white shirt at a McDonald's? I don't know.
He eats there all the time. He eats there all
Okay.
the time. Do you eat
That's
McDonald's?
advocating.
Do you eat-
That's great for our healthcare system, right? To advocate for people to go eat him. I
Well-
mean, I just, he has no logic. Like, his logic
Mhm.
is very flawed. It's very flawed. He's a scary man to me. And he's, it's funny, but earlier I was taking notes. Nathaniel Wright was talking about he's a racist, he's a fascist, and he didn't say misogynist. And I was going to say that, but then someone else brought it up. I mean, think of the words we've used to describe this man tonight. I don't understand. I don't understand how he can even be at the top of the ticket for the Republican Party. I just don't get it. There's so many other better qualified Republicans. I mean, Tom Santulli, you should run for president. I mean, let's be honest. He's not a level-headed person. He's off balance. I'm sorry.
Former Congressman Cheney said something the other night that registered with me. She said, "Why would anybody vote for Donald Trump if you wouldn't even have him babysitting your kids?" I thought that was common sense.
Yeah.
I thought that was that's something that I thought was a comment that was straight out of common sense, and I think would resonate with a lot of the American people, Deborah. By the way, I want to just mention, you've always been a champion for the environment,
Yes.
and environmental reform, and trying to save the planet, as was your mother, who was a crusader for the environment. And I
Yeah.
wish she was on the program this evening. A great woman, your
Thank
late mom.
Yeah,
Tom
just so you
Riley.
know, there's a college fund that's in her name, and it's
Oh.
done through it's People for a Healthy Environment and myself. They funded a college education fund for her that'll last at least 10 years.
Okay, if
No.
people want to contribute to that fund, I hope they have a pencil and, or a pen and something to write with. How do they contribute to that fund?
Well, we're doing it through the Community Foundation in Horseheads.
Mhm.
So you could, if you wanted to, you could send a check to there in care of the Ruth Young Environmental College Fund. And it's for kids that are going into anything weather, environment related, like even weather. Like we made it kind of broad, but it's
Mhm.
science-based, environment-based, recycling, that type of thing. They can apply for and receive. It's a $2,000 scholarship per year, and we're hoping to grow it, obviously, to continue on in her name.
Okay, well, thank you.
Mhm.
Folks, ladies and gentlemen of the Twin Tiers, at this point, I'm an old guy. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't want Donald Trump taking care of me. So anyway, Tom Riley is an attorney. an attorney par excellence. He's been around the Twin Tiers for years. He has quite a reputation as an advocate, a fighter, Cornell Law School graduate, and really proud to have him on the program. Tom Riley, Attorney Tom Riley, Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris, Election Day coming up on November the 5th. What say you?
Well, to go back into your life experiences, in 1968, I got a notice I was going to get drafted. That, in case people don't remember, aren't old enough, was about the height of the Vietnam War. And I was opposed to it. And I wrestled with, what am I going to do? And one kid I knew when I was in high school had fled the United States and gone to Canada, and his parents suffered for that. And I said, I can't do that. I can't do that for the country. I can't do that to my parents. So I enlisted in the Navy for 4 years and spent 4 years there, dutifully opposed to the war in Vietnam through the entire period of time. I had a top secret clearance. I was enlisted all the time, and I really learned to respect the military. The officers that were in there, they were career oriented. And when they attacked somebody who was the chief of staff, as Trump has done, for speaking his mind about Trump's beliefs, that's offensive to me personally. I cannot believe that a person of that character would lie about what he heard from Trump. And, you know, it's just, you know, hearing people. And then when I heard that Trump was a draft dodger and that he had ankle spurs, and that's how he got out of the service, I totally believed it. And I had pain in my ankles for 4 years when I was in the Navy. And he was a liar. And his doctor was a liar. And that's not a kind of person who should be president of the United States. And what he's doing with immigration is feeding the racism that's inherent in America. I'm Irish. Don't hire the Irish. I can remember that when I was going to high school. Irish were scum of the earth. I remember representing people who had moved here from the Bronx, where my father grew up. They were Black, and they were complaining about the Spaniards, the Latinos, moving into their neighborhood and ruining it. And I said, you know what you sound like? I said, no, who do I sound like? You said you sound like my white parents. They complained about you people moving into the Bronx. You were ruining the neighborhood, and you're not. And what he's doing with all this stuff about eating pets and things like that is a total lie. And it does, these people, I spent 2 years in Panama. I knew a lot of Latinos. I respected them. I knew what their lives were like under poverty and totalitarianism and fear of their lives. And they're strong, hardworking people. And they want to do well. And they don't want to be suffering for things. I know, talked to a friend of mine recently, and I asked her about this stuff about Haitians eating animal pets. I said, does that mean when I was in Panama, that I was in the country, I would have seen all these Panamanians eating their pets? I said, was it just cats and dogs? How about their hamsters? Do they eat them too? Oh, yeah. I said, I would have seen them. He says, sure. I said, only pets I saw were hot dogs. I mean, it's just a shame what he's doing. And what people don't realize when you're talking about that is that a lot of these people are a blessing to our country. We live on immigration. They help support our country. And these people work for less wages than other people do. And they're hardworking people. And a lot of them, despite what these people complain about, are not sponges on society. They may get Social Security taken out of their salary, but they don't gain a benefit from it. They're not eligible for it yet, but they pay into it and they don't complain. So what's wrong with them? What's wrong with Trump for doing what he's doing? He's just feeding into hatred in America. And I want one other characterization to what Trump is. He's sexist. He's the most sexist person I've ever met. And I've known a lot of sexist people. But when he makes a comment on the Hollywood tape about a woman's part of her body, that is the most terrible comment I've ever heard. And I've heard people say that all the time. I've heard women say that all the time. He meant it in a derogatory way. So that's enough.
Tom Rowley, very well put. I just a quick question before we move on to Susan Betch-Tatoma, attorney Susan Betch-Tatoma. We've heard a lot about Donald Trump. He's a racist, he's a sexist, he's a fascist, he's a misogynist. Given that, why does so many Americans support Donald Trump? What's the deal here? Tom Rowley.
Maybe that's what a lot of people are. Maybe they fit into his characterization. Maybe they're sexist. Maybe they're misogynistic. I mean, that's what I hear about. Why do young white males support him? He talks their language, you know, and it's terrible. It's unfortunate that happens that way. But I think that's one reason that happens. They're not offended by it. I mean, he talks like it, he acts like it, he is it. And they don't see that. And because they're like that.
Mm.
Education.
Yep. Tom Rowley, thank you for straight talk. That's why I like Tom Rowley in this program, because he's a straight talker, an attorney that tells it like it is. Tom Rowley. Susan Betch-Tatoma is also an attorney, a pastor of the Shiloh Community Church in Corning. Susan Betch-Tatoma, in my view, tells it like it is. So Susan, Donald Trump running against Kamala Harris for the presidency of the United States. Who do you think is going to win? Susan Betch-Tatoma.
So I'll tell you, I think Trump's going to win, but I'll tell you why I think that. I have so many notes and I'd like to get to them.
Go ahead.
My real concerns about Trump is really his age. I mean, he's 78 years old, and in another 4 years, he'll be 82. And any of us who have elderly loved ones know how quickly people can deteriorate. My concern about Kamala Harris is that she has inexperience. She has never run anything. She's never been a governor. She's never run a company. And now she's in line to run the whole country. I'm concerned about people calling Donald Trump a threat to democracy when Kamala Harris was not elected by anyone to run for president. But, you know, here she is, except if you count, you know, she was elected for vice president, but it was Biden who was elected to run, and then they didn't open up the convention. So with Trump, the benefit is you know where he stands, and you know where the people who hate him stand. But I don't think you know where people who aren't going to vote for Kamala Harris stand. I think that there are a lot of people who claim to be undecided, but I don't really believe that anyone is undecided at this point. The choice is so stark and so different. I've heard Trump called misogynist tonight, but I happen to remember that during the campaign and that he had against Hillary Clinton, he was paying men and women equally, and Hillary Clinton was not. So that's not a thing a misogynist does. I know he said a lot of piggy things, and I don't like him for that, and I don't like him personally, but I'm going by my notes and answering what I've heard. The Electoral College has to stay. Otherwise, you've got the coasts deciding who wins the presidential election. And it was designed so that every state would have a say who our federal leadership was. I heard Trump called a fascist, and I'm not sure that we're understanding the dictionary definition of fascism. Fascism is a right-wing government that is nationalistic or patriotic, depending on whether you like it or not, and it has a strong leader figurehead. So that's what fascism is. So if you're saying Trump wants a right-wing patriotic government where he will be a strong leader, yeah, probably. That's probably exactly what he stands for. I do know that people of color did well economically under Trump. He did not shoot protesters in the legs and all of the other things that he's been accused that he's going to do when we have 4 years of experience of him not doing it. The quote about the German generals, I saw on television today something in depth about that. He said German generals, and then somebody was arguing with him about, well, what about Hitler? But he didn't come right out and say anything about Hitler. He didn't talk about a period in time. He was talking about, and I don't think it was a good thing to say, but he was saying, gee, I wish you, general, who don't listen to me, would listen to me like these guys did. So, you know, name calling is what they have. And when you have to reach back, I don't know how many years for a video or for something he said when he was president to a general so many years ago, that's what you got? That's what you got for your candidate? That doesn't say very good things for your candidate when that's what you have to offer. And when Donald Trump rambles, and he does ramble, but he's telling you what his positions are. He's not avoiding telling you what his positions are. He's coming right out with it. Again, you know where he stands. And as far as the spiritual aspect of it, I would just remind you that King David was both an adulterer and a murderer. Moses was a murderer. Abraham forced himself on a slave and then abandoned the slave and the child that resulted from that. So, you know, God uses everyone. God uses flawed people, and sometimes terribly, terribly flawed people. So I don't think that God is on someone's side as much of an argument here today. So let's see, what else? Abortion. So there's an assumption that, or there seems to be an assumption underlying the conversation about abortion, that women are a monolithic group that are in favor of abortion. Some people who are female are in favor of the right of people to be born, especially after they pass a certain point of viability. Now, I think most sane people agree that there should be exceptions for, you know, health, life of the mother, certainly the tragic case where the child was going to be born dead anyway, you know, certainly if the child's going to die soon anyway, why force the mother to carry the child? I think we all agree we want what's best for children, whether you're anti-abortion or whether you're pro-life, whatever you want to call it. We want what's best for children. We disagree about what's best for children. So pro-abortion people say, well, we want every child to be wanted. Okay, so that's good. That's good to want every child to be wanted. But if you're pro-life, you want every child that's possible and right to be born. And there are too many people, I think studies do show there are too many people who are just very casual about it and use abortion as birth control. We have good, safe birth control in this country. So a woman does have control over her own body. She just has to do some planning. Now, again, I understand there are cases of rape and incest and sex abuse, and I'm not talking about that. I don't think any sane person wants to see anybody forced to carry a child in those situations. But to assume that, you know, that women or people who care about women are going to vote for Kamala because she's pro-abortion is probably a mistake to assume that. Now, again, getting back to why I think Trump will win, although nothing would surprise me. Nothing would surprise me at all. I think that you have a lot of people who are claiming to be undecided who are not. Similarly to when Hillary was running, I think we're seeing the Hillarization of polling, in that people who are not going to vote for Kamala Harris don't want to say they're not going to vote for A, the Black person, or B, the woman. But I think that there's probably a lot of that going on. And that may be why you're not seeing signs in the yard, because people, I mean, you've heard the rhetoric tonight. Anybody who's pro-Trump, you can't possibly be for the economy that he had. You can't possibly be for his concern about the border. You can't possibly be for the fact that people of every race and ethnicity did well under his administration economically. You can't be for him as a strong leader internationally, and that other people are afraid of him and wars didn't happen during his administration. No, it can't be that. You have to be a racist or a misogynist or a fascist or something else. If name calling is all you have, you don't have anything.
Thank you, Susan Betch-Tatoma. Wanted to mention that Dennis Sweeney is the executive producer of Political Pundit Night. Tonight, Brandon Keiss is handling things at WETM for us. He's sitting in for Spencer Gustafson. And I want to thank all the great folks at WETM for their support of Pundit Night, with a special thanks to Lisa Sturdivant for all of her great work. And talking about military heroes and people that have been in the military and served our country, the relatively new news director at WETM, James Turpin, is a proud veteran of the Marine Corps. So thumbs up to Jim Turpin, and thank him. I thank him. I think we all should thank him for his service in the Marine Corps. Want to move on. Dr. Richard Dozier, he's an author, pastor, educator, a former vice president at Corning Community College. Dr. Dozier is also a straight talker. Dr. Dozier, Donald Trump, you just heard Susan Betch-Tatoma, you've heard everybody else so far that has chimed in. Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris, who do you think is going to win and why? Dr. Dozier.
Well, I'll say that I'm praying for Kamala Harris to win. And I voted for Kamala, early voting. I want to touch on a couple of points because earlier you mentioned, as well as Brett, as well as Joseph, about the Electoral College. Let's look at the history of the Electoral College. It is based on slavery. The northern states were more populated than the southern states with whites, but the southern states were more populated with the enslaved. And so therefore, the Electoral College, in order to give the southern states some more representation, blacks or the enslaved were counted as 1/5. Wow, yeah, they let us in for something, huh? Okay, but it is outdated. We need to start going on the popular vote and no longer do this electoral college thing. As I said, its roots is in slavery. When we start talking, I agree a little bit with Georgia in terms of in Trump becoming president, but I don't say God appointed or anointed Trump to be president. I say he allowed Trump to be president. Why? Because we wanted to see the true America. It's very frightening. We hear, Biden, we hear others say, oh, this is not America. Yes, it is. It's 50% of America for those who were going for supporting Trump. So that is a part of America. It's a part of America's founding, and it's a part of America's history, rooted in all of this racism. And so I just want to point out that, and when we say about him being a racist, well, let's look at it. He's picking on the Haitians. He's picking on the Congos, saying that they're coming in. He's picking on the Mexicans. And so he's picking on these racial groups that are black. But what did he say about what kind of immigrants he wanted in America? Those coming from Sweden, from Finland. We want those type of people coming in. That's what Donald Trump said now. Okay, so it is America. That is what America is saying. And in reference to the religious aspect of it, when we start looking at all these evangelicals who are supporting Trump, and I look at it this way: when Pontius Pilate brought out Barabbas and he brought out Jesus, and he said, "Who shall I set free?" And the crowd started yelling, "Give us Barabbas! Give us Barabbas!" Well, we're standing there. We're looking at Trump, and we're looking at Harris. And what are the evangelicals crying? Give us Trump! Give us the liar! Give us the thief! Give us that misogynist! Give us this man that we know who has been convicted of 34 crimes. So that is America. And the evangelicals, the Bible does talk about the very elect shall be deceived. So the evangelicals are way off course in terms of who they're supporting. And then also when we start looking at Harris, she had 90 days to put together a committee, a campaign committee, 90 days, 3 months to get all this in action. And it's still pulling together. Trump has had 10 years? He's been running for 10 years. And so in this acceptance of Trump's behavior, is this how we really want other countries to? Well, this is, first of all, they are looking and laughing at us, and saying about Trump. You referred to CNN's commentator about word salad. And I did listen. I love CNN. I watch it almost all day.
Yeah, that was James Axelrod, a Democrat who was very close to Barack Obama. Said if Kamala Harris doesn't want to answer a question, she seems to engage in verbal word salads. That's what David Axelrod thinks. Hardly a Republican. I mean, he's a staunch Democrat and was pro-Obama, advised Barack Obama.
Right, but later on in that same interview, or yes, he sort of like rescinded it in terms of saying that it wasn't, maybe he misspoke. I'd have to go back and listen to it, but he rescinded on that to some degree. But then when we look at Harris, she's a lawyer. So here again, and as she said that she's thinking, she likes to put all these things together in a process. And so instead of being quick at the tongue, and coming out with anything out of her mouth, she is thinking. And so therefore, that's why she may be slow to speak, opposed to Donald, who's doing the weave. Here he was supposed to be having a town hall meeting where the people were supposed to ask him questions. And what is he doing? He's dancing 47 minutes of dancing.
The YMCA as well as others. YMCA as well as others. Yes.
Right. And they asked him not to be using that song as well, the founders of that group. And so when we start looking at this Trump, the question is, do you really? Yes, he does represent a very part of America, America's history, past, and its future.
Dr. Dozier, one thing I've heard, one thesis I've heard this evening is we got Donald Trump because God wants to really reveal the ugliness of America. Mm-hmm. If that's the case, Dr. Dozier, is it possible that God wants Trump to be reelected because that will really show the ugliness of America with a Trump second term? What do you say, Dr. Dozier?
Yeah, I don't say God wants, but God will allow it to happen, because God's hand is not in the day-to-day operation of men, but he's permissive. He will allow things to happen and saying, well, I'll allow Trump to be president to show what America is really like. And why, we say, God bless America.
Well, do you think that God may allow him to be president for a second term to show what America is really like?
Within that, God is allowing the people to select their leader. And that's what's really taking place. And if it happens to be Trump, then he's going to allow that to happen. If it's Harris, he'll allow that to happen. And so it's not about who God wants, but it's about what God has allowed to occur in this society.
Dr. Richard Dozier. Dr. Dozier is an author, pastor, educator, a former vice president at Corning Community College. And Dr. Dozier is a straight talker. I love the fact that on this show, we have straight talkers, whether they're on the conservative side or the in the middle of the road or to the left. We have straight shooters.
And I'm glad of that, because you haven't thrown me off.
No, I would never think of doing that. And again, thanks Next Star TV and WETM for continuing to support this program, for allowing it to air on the cyber waves of America. We have people all over the country that watch this. We have hundreds of people that watch. And for a podcast, that's pretty darn good for a podcast, especially in a market like Elmira, New York. Christopher Callis, I call Christopher Callis the consummate community educator, because Christopher Callis puts together a college fair for people in the community every year at the Elks Club. And it's not only for young people, but it's for the old buzzards, old buzzards like me and everybody else. And I really think that's wonderful, Christopher Callis. And at this point, Christopher, you're on the program. Maybe give us briefly what's going on with the next college fair at the Elks Club, when, where, what's going on with that. And then Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris. What say you? Chris Callis.
Well, Dr. Coleman, thank you for having me on tonight. I appreciate this opportunity to speak on your show. Couple things. First and foremost, the new date is going to be April 30th at the Elmira Elks College Fair. That is downtown Elmira. That's in Legislator Sturmer's backyard. So if Brent is listening, I'd love to have your support this year, Brent, and get the word out to all your constituents. And that would be nice. So if I could get you on live TV to show your support, boy, that'd go a long way, Brent. Thank you much. The other thing is what I'm looking to do this year, and if anyone's listening and they want to make donations, I would like to have the first college fair ever to have a live drawing for scholarships right there in attendance. I'd like to raise enough money where we can say, here's a check. You just were given a $500 or $250 or $250 scholarship. I'm looking to raise another $1,000 this year to give it to a student right in hand, and that's through the Elks.
Well, Christopher Callis, I support that as long as Elon Musk is not doing it. I support that.
I haven't heard from Mr. Musk, so I can't say he is.
Elon Musk, yes.
Yeah. So with that said, April 30th, mark your calendars. Again, it's open to everybody, not just high school students. It's also open to returning students, Colonial Community College graduates, who are looking to transfer, or someone that wants to complete their degree. It's open to everybody, and this will be my 14th year running it. So again, that's at the Elmira Elks, downtown Elmira on Baldwin and Gray Street, from 6 to 8 p.m. With that being said, speaking of education, if you're not registered to vote, I haven't heard anybody mention this yet tonight, the deadline here in New York State is October 26th. So you have to October 26th to register to vote. You still have 2 more days to get out there or go online and register to vote and participate in this upcoming election. So please, if you're not registered, get registered. The other part I'd like to mention is you're talking about who's going to win and so forth. I will say this. I saw something that I've never seen before. Back about a week and a half ago, I saw a Trump train of vehicles go by me on the corner of College and McCann's Boulevard. I don't know how many there were, but I know I sat there for at least several minutes watching the cars go by, or the trucks, I should say, excuse me, with the flags in the back, with the American flag and the Trump flag. I've never seen such a display or show. It was pretty impressive. I got to say that, to see how many Trump supporters came. I've heard they came from Painted Post and went down to Pennsylvania. I don't know. Someone had told me that. But I saw it right in firsthand go right by me. There was a lot of vehicles. So that was a big support. I have not seen anything else like that for any other candidate. I don't care what office they're running for. So that was pretty impressive to see that. Speaking of signs and yards, I will tell you, there are signs that are being stolen right here in Elmira Heights from people that put signs up in their yard. Last I knew, that was illegal to go into someone's property and steal a political sign, or any sign for that matter. And that's happening still to this day. And that's a shame. And I believe it's also a crime. But again, it's happening. They're stealing signs in people's yards. If it happens to you, you need to report it to police and let them know that, and then file a report, because it's important to get this on paper that there has been this. Some people even have it on video showing the person coming in the yard stealing the sign. So it is happening. One other thing I want to mention, Deb Lynch mentioned about the environment, and I loved her mom. And I will tell you, her fight for the environmental right. Look at downtown Elmira, by the other side of the viaduct, what they're doing with that big environmental cleanup from PCVs that are happening right here in Elmira. You know, it's terrible. My own father died of PCB poisoning. He worked in the railroad 37 years. There it's happening right here in our own backyard. It's not just here, it's all over these things. So we need to think about this planet that we are choking out. It's important because we only have one planet. And we've got to, whether you're Republican or Democrat, we need to work together to save Mother Earth. I will tell you, and that's something that is dear to my heart. I know it was dear to Deb's and her mom's, and I support that mission. I'm not sure, Dr. Coleman, I'm not Nostradamus, but I will tell you one thing. If you go back to the 2016 election, I thought that Donald Trump outworked and out-hustled, at that time, Senator Clinton. I thought because some of these tapes that came out about him, his comments, and maybe might have been celebrated prematurely, and he was still crisscrossing the day of the election, campaigning. So to hear that Kamala Harris is out there doing that, crisscrossing and going back and forth, that's a good sign to me she's working. So it looks like they're both going to fight to the end. I think it's too close to call. I'm not sure who's going to win, but I will say this again. You have till October 26th in New York State to register to vote. So get out and vote. I know that we've had people say, getting out to vote, if you need a ride, call someone, they'll get you a ride. If you're concerned, go online, see where your next polling is, call your board of elections and find out where the closest one to your house is. It's very important that people get out and vote. They say vote like your life depends on it. Well, you know what? It does. And your future and your grandkids and your kids. Get out there and vote. I can't stress that enough. But I will tell you one thing most importantly. We're all Americans, and we need to pull together. There's a lot of negativity, a lot of threats, a lot of people angry. We need to pull together. We're Americans, and I'm a proud American, and I hope that we can all work together no matter who wins this election, because it's important for our future and our family and our kids' future. And I'm worried that we're not going to have a safe, and I think one mentioned outcome until like a week later. Who knows what's going to happen? I hope there's no violence. I pray that there isn't. But I will tell you, you need to get out and vote and make a difference. Every vote, every single vote counts. And I'm a firm believer in that. And if you can get out and vote, vote. If you can't, get some help to get you out to vote or get your vote to the polls. And I think Georgia said that one time, one of the things, get the polls to the souls to the polls. We need to do that in every election. I've seen elections where there's been so many little people that haven't come out. It's embarrassing. And I can't stress enough, it isn't just the big elections. All politics are local. And I think Mr. Santulli would agree with me. It starts right here in our backyard. All elections start right here. Get out and vote. And Dr. Coleman, as always, thank you for having me on. But April 30th, I'm at Elks 14th year college fair, and I'll see you there, Mr. Sturmer.
Christopher Callis, community leader, thank you. Chris, always like to hear what you have to say. Also, to follow up on something, I truly believe that there's more, and Kamala Harris has said this recently, and I believed it. I think lots of folks in this panel, I think maybe everybody, believes that at the end of the day, there's more that we have in common than tears us apart. There's unity in America, and we have to really stress the unity and the community and all of that. I wanted to mention something else as we end this program. As you know, the Dobbs decision overturned Roe v. Wade, and it punted issues of abortion to the states. And in New York, so people will say, well, gee, what about New York? Well, in New York, abortion has been legally protected since 1970. Even before Roe v. Wade, abortion was legally guaranteed in the state of New York. And then over the years, it's been reinforced. But what has happened is after the Dobbs decision, people are worried, well, my goodness, could we have at some point in New York a group of legislators that will go against pro-choice? So instead of having the right to abortion guaranteed by law, let's enshrine it in the New York State Constitution. And that brings us to proposal number 1 in the ballot. The idea is to enshrine abortion rights in the Constitution. The DNA of New York State is in the New York State Constitution. It is fundamental in terms of the government of New York. But there's some controversy over this because the Constitution currently protects unequal treatment. If unequal treatment that is based on race, color, and creed and religion, those things are not allowed. Discrimination based on those things is not allowed in the current state constitution. Race, color, creed, religion, discrimination in those areas. Now, the proposal number 1, and this is where the controversy is, it not only enshrines abortion rights in the New York State Constitution, but a whole bunch of other stuff. I have here, this is from the State Elections Board, an abstract of proposal number 1. I'm reading from that. If it's passed, if the voters of New York pass proposal number 1, it's also going to protect national origin, ethnicity, age, disability, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, pregnancy, and pregnancy outcomes, as well as reproductive health care and autonomy. So this proposal number 1, a lot of people are saying it's a Pandora's box with a lot of liberal things that are going to be added to the Constitution that will not be good for New York State and the people of New York. Again, there'll be a debate on this. The debate is, you see ads on TV about it already, but that's proposal number 1. But it grew out of the overturning of Roe v. Wade and the Dobbs decision, and folks in New York saying, well, we need something beyond just state law to protect free choice in the state of New York. But it grew, and a lot of stuff has been added on to it. Georgia Verdier, you started this evening after Jeff Murray, and Joseph Kolosinski, Professor Kolosinski, you started and you mentioned about God and the election. You've listened, to a lot of comments this evening. In terms of being a political analyst here tonight, one of the political analysts, what do you think?
I'm glad you came back to me because I really did want to say something about reproductive rights. And in terms of that, I believe in pro-choice. Now, I might not ever have an abortion, and anybody who don't want to have one shouldn't have one. But I believe people should have the right to make that decision for themselves. And nobody has a right to tell a woman what she can and cannot do. And I still think there's going to be a major issue in this election. And I just wanted to say, what is happening, rules and regs are going on the book, all punishing women as if we are the major problem. And many that the laws are being made by men, and they are 50% of the problem. If men would keep their pistols in their holsters, 50% of the reproduction issues would be solved.
Thank you, Georgia Verdier, for that comment. Jeff Murray, journalist Jeff Murray, Star Gazette, USA Today Network. If you were writing an article on what you've heard in the last, hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, what would be your takeaways from this discussion this evening? Jeff Murray.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I was just thinking about it. And frankly, I can see this discussion as being kind of a microcosm of what's actually happening in the United States right now. I've heard many passionate arguments. I've heard many well thought out arguments on both sides. And, there's such a divide right now in this country, as it's clear as it's a divide in this group. And these are all people, I think we all figured out how to get along with each other, even though there's obviously some very divergent opinions. But I think as Mr. Callis mentioned, eventually we need to figure out, no matter who's elected, we have to live with that and live with each other and figure out how we can make this country work. We survived through many different presidents and governments and crises, and ultimately, I think it's got to come down to us deciding, no matter who's in charge, we have to figure out a way to get along with each other, put aside our differences. And frankly, if I was writing a story, I think that's how the story would go. I don't know who's going to win this election, and no matter who wins, I hope that all of us can figure out a way to carry forward.
Jeff Murray, who I call the dean of journalism in the Twin Tiers, and Jeff, by the way, has a really robust voice, and he has a background in radio also. So I always welcome him as a journalist, a broadcaster, print journalist, broadcast journalist on this program. This is the 37th Political Pundit Night, coming to you live on mytwintiers.com. The 38th Political Pundit Night will be 100 days after the presidential election, February the 13th, 2025. And I want to thank all of the people that watch this show religiously, and also tell their friends about it, because it does get a big audience for this kind of a program in a smaller media market. I also want to thank, besides all the great folks who I really appreciate, the pundits. Tonight's pundits, Dr. Joseph Kolosinski, Jeff Murray, Georgia Verdier, the Reverend Nathaniel Wright, Tom Santulli, the former Chemung County executive, Brent Sturmer, Chemung County legislator, Deborah Lynch, member of the New York State Democratic Committee, Hammondsport Village trustee, Tom Riley, attorney, Susan Betch-Tatoma, attorney, pastor of the Shiloh Community Church in Corning, Dr. Richard Dozier, author, pastor, educator, and Christopher Callis, community educator, who puts together those wonderful college fairs for young people, but also Gieserheimers. It used to be, when I was younger, I was a Weisenheimer, and now I'm a Gieserheimer. But even Gieserheimers like myself can go to this college fair and learn about different college programs. So all of you tonight, all of you did a great job. You were respectful. You shared your viewpoints. And this is what America is supposed to be like. This is America, I think, is a reality, but it's also an ideal. America, we talk about a democracy, we talk about people treating each other with respect and dignity. I think that's a reality in America, but it's always something that we're striving toward. It's a reality and an ideal at the same time. And I really, precious, your thoughts are precious. And Nathaniel Wright, Reverend Nathaniel Wright, pastor of the Calvary Baptist Church in Corning, always appreciate your being here. Dennis Sweeney, the executive producer, you people are so wonderful. You pundits, leaders, and analysts, and commentators. We're very lucky in the Twin Tiers to have men and women like you. And my name is Dr. Stephen Coleman, your PhD of politics, your alleged PhD of politics. Thank you so much for watching. Good night, and we'll see you again on the 38th Political Pundit Night right here, mytwintiers.com.